Chapter 35.
Laguna Part 5.
The worst part about the hard and fast no-talking rule was Laguna being forced to push down his desire to hum. He liked to do so while he worked. Sometimes, he would just sing outright. It made working go by that much faster. Of course, this might not qualify as work. Technically, Laguna thought it was more slave labor. That was why there was a no-talking rule in the first place. Along with the harsh hours, terrible food, and lack of pay. And now, on top of everything, the fairies were back. Laguna tried not to make a sound as he scratched his head. "All right, fairies, settle down. This is hardly the time for your power right now." He stood up from the platform he had been screwing into place, rubbing his sore back. He turned and looked out over his two co-workers. Some rather nondescript guy whose clothes were baggy from a long time without proper nutrition. And a flaming-haired Moomba. The guy was typing in commands into a terminal. The Moomba was hanging out over the side of the platform, suspended on a tiny ledge over a fall so high Laguna couldn't see the bottom. Honestly, he was surprised to see a Moomba here. He thought they were all far up north. He felt really bad for the poor thing. He felt bad for all of them actually. The SR guard in the corner with the very deadly circular gun blade had them all under his watch. Laguna had been there for hours already. Though he didn't know how many. It was hard to tell when there was no sunlight or clocks or anything here to mark the passage of time. He only knew it had been quite a while since one of the other guards had ordered Kiros and Ward down to the lunatic Pandora to work in the crystal caves. Which left Laguna up here with the guy whose name he couldn't ask and the Moomba who couldn't tell him even if he could. Letting out a soft sigh, Laguna moved over to where the elevator was docked. Fixing the tracking system was on his rather long to-do list of chores. Even as he was approaching it, his stomach started groaning bitterly. Laguna had to bite his tongue to keep a moan of pain back. His gut had been complaining for a while now and it was only getting worse.
"I'm hungry,"
he murmured softly. Not softly enough.
I said no talking."
The SR guard growled, leveling his gun at him.
"It's only been 3 days, you wimp. When I was young, I worked all day, all night, without even sleep."
"Oh, Hein. Not this again." More hours passed and Laguna still hadn't finished the elevator. He probably could have by now if he wasn't so unfocused from hunger and sleep deprivation. The only thing they did have was water and that was because they needed that steadily to stay alive. A slave workforce was considerably more useless when everyone was dead from dehydration. Laguna paused in his work to go get a drink. At least that would put something in his stomach. It was a hollow sort of comfort, but one took what one could get. He paused as he looked towards the door leading down into the Pandora.
"I wonder if Kiros and Ward are doing okay."
Laguna didn't realize he had voiced his thoughts until the guard snapped at him again.
"No talking."
Laguna jumped in surprise. He honestly hadn't even been trying to speak. The guard growled, coming forward.
"How many times do I have to?"
A cheerful bell dinged from overhead and Laguna's face broke out into a wide smile.
"Oh, sweet. Mealtime. All right, it's time to eat."
He turned quickly, ready to run to the elevator. They got fed at irregular intervals. And the food was terrible. Honestly though, he could probably eat thrusty meat right now and think it a feast fit for a king. The guard's sharp denial stopped him.
You keep working. That's what you get for your big mouth. That beast over there, you too. No meal for you until your work is done. What?
Laguna gasped in indignation. The third guy looked at them apologetically but didn't stop going towards the elevator. He felt bad, but what could he do?
You can't be serious.
Laguna shook his head at the guard.
I'll be done in 2 or 3 hours, but his job won't get done for days.
The guard laughed derisively.
Well then, he just won't get fed for a few days. If he wants to eat, he should work faster.
The injustice of it burned Laguna. But he was powerless right now. A few hours later, the other guy was back at his post. He smelled like food. Laguna knew he didn't do it on purpose, but it was pure torture having to smell him. He didn't know when he would get a chance to eat again. It seemed so far away now. But that was nothing compared to the Moomba. That poor thing would have to keep working.
Hey!
Laguna jumped guiltily before he realized the sharp yell wasn't directed at him.
Come give me a hand,
a guard said from the doorway, talking to their overseer. He jerked his head down towards the inside of the Pandora.
I can't handle the big guy alone.
The guard nodded but turned to his prisoners. He pointed at them threateningly.
Don't do anything stupid while I'm gone. The camera is still watching you.
Laguna blinked as he ran down into the Pandora. What was going on?
PSST.
Laguna turned to see the other guy was holding a single, smuggled piece of bread in his hand. He was trying to surreptitiously pass it to Laguna. Smiling at him thankfully, Laguna took it and quickly stowed it into his pocket. He nodded his gratitude and the other guy nodded back, a small half-smile in place. Then, instead of eating it, Laguna walked quickly over to the Moomba who was still working on the platform on the small ledge.
Hey, you alright?
He asked under his breath.
You look exhausted. Here. It's not much, but take it.
The Moomba looked up at him in surprise, then down to the bread Laguna was holding out, hiding it from the camera with his body. The other worker was staring at him from the panel. The Moomba reached out and took hold of the bread. Then quickly stuffed it into his mouth. He chewed and swallowed fast. The poor guy was probably starving. Laguna never got to see him eat because they didn't let him do so with the humans. Like he was a beast or something.
Do they feed you all right?
Laguna asked, worried.
I bet not. How are you holding up? Do you have a fever? Or are you just scared of heights?
The Moomba made a soft growling/purring sound. Laguna tilted his head.
Your stomach's going grr.
The other worker started laughing.
That's funny. Hey. I think that thing's grr sound means thank you. At least, he always makes that sound whenever I would think to say thank you. You know what? You're the first one to care about his well-being. These Moombas get worked to death for no reason. They only get half the food and sleep compared to us humans. That's horrible.
Laguna frowned at the poor thing. He was already working again.
You need to get out of here.
He smiled and struck a pose for him.
You know what? When we get bust out of this place, I'll give you all the food you want. Whatever strikes your fancy. And you'll get to nap all day. How's that?
The Moomba looked at him and made that growling slash purr again. Now that Laguna thought about it, it was a sound he had heard a lot in the Shumi village. Smiling at him, a large rumbling echoed around the Pandora. They all wavered in place as an irate, heavily accented voice yelled from above.
Experiment! Experiment! Let's just do this! Bah! This is a failure! Sounds like Dr. Odine's up to something again,
the other guy shrugged, looking away from the viewing platform high above their heads. Laguna shrugged. He had been here for a while, but he hadn't yet seen the famous doctor. He had only heard him, yelling from about. Not that he was all that curious. He had more important things to worry about. As he was turning to get back to work so he wouldn't get in trouble again, the Moomba started making soft purring noises, pointing across the platform.
Hey! What's up?
Laguna asked him, following his paw.
Oh, you need a tool? I'll go get it. Wait right there.
He walked over to the corner where his tools were laid out. He crouched down, grabbing for the wrench that the Moomba would need on the bolts over there.
Hey!
Starting, Laguna looked over his shoulder to see that the guard had returned. He was panting, part of his uniform bleeding. He pointed at Laguna.
You over there? Yeah, standing next to the elevator. Go get the guards upstairs. Tell them there's an emergency. Roger that.
Laguna stood and moved to the elevator. He pressed the call button and stood back, crossing his arms. An emergency? That guard had gone down there to help with the big one, right? Maybe the guys were up to something? Did they feel the fairies too and decide to use their power to escape? Laguna was certainly considering it.
Hey! Go now!
The guard turned and ran back down.
Hey!
Laguna opened his eyes to see the elevator doors had opened. He had been lost in thought and hadn't moved.
All right, I'm going. Oh! I almost forgot. Hey, buddy! Here, catch!
Turning, he tossed the wrench over to the unprepared Moomba. The Moomba was just looking up when it smacked into his head. Laguna cried out as the Moomba started falling over. Squeaking in distress, he barely caught himself. Laguna sprinted over, nearly throwing himself over the rail. He grabbed the wrists of the Moomba and jerked up quickly. The Moomba pulled at the same time and, working together, they pulled him over the rails and onto the safety of the platform. Letting out a sigh of relief, then laughter, and looked to the sprawled Moomba who was shaking his head, sitting back onto his haunches.
Geez, what was too close? I'm so glad.
Laughing slightly hysterically now, Laguna wiped at his face to disguise his relieved tears.
I'm so glad.
The other worker blinked at him in shock. He didn't just care for the Moomba, he was crying in relief at his safety. If he hadn't been strong enough to pull him over and the Moomba fell, he could have gone right over with him. And the food he had smuggled down had been immediately given out to the little friendly monster thing despite himself not having eaten in days.
You're such a nice guy,
he breathed in amazement. Laguna calmed down, looking over to him. He smiled at the compliment.
Not many guys like you these days.
He shook his head, still baffled at this man he had been working with for weeks now.
You seem like you would be a good candidate to be our leader. Hey? What leader?
Laguna blinked.
That's right.
The other guy pressed forward. He looked around before crouching and whispering conspiratorially to him.
Listen, a lot of us are rather dissatisfied with the way Adel's been ruling SDR. We may be disorganized now, but someday we're going to gather our forces and remove Adele from her bloody throne. We're overthrowing the ruler of a country. A sorceress, far beyond our powers. A handful of disorganized rebels with a half-baked plan would never work. We're waiting for the right time. For the right guy to lead us. There's a lot of us that are specialists working really close to her, too. It's easy to research ways to fight Adele. All the intel in the world won't be any good without a leader though. We've been looking for someone like you. Someone who's strong and righteous. Wami.
Laguna pointed at himself in surprise.
Hey.
The three of them turned to see the guard back in the door. He was glaring at Laguna.
Did you go tell them? What are you three doing? You're up to no good again, ARandomAudiobookAppeared.
Charging forward, the guard leveled his gun at them.
Stop!
Laguna jumped to his feet. The guard pulled on the trigger. Laguna's hand snapped around his wrist, forcing his arm up. The shotgun blasted towards the ceiling. The Moomba and other guy flinched, falling to their knees. The guard and Laguna grappled for a long moment. Laguna was starving, but adrenaline was pumping hot in his blood. He only needed to remind himself of the abuse heaped on the Moomba for some extra anger-powered energy to put more strength into his muscles. The fairies probably still did most of the work. Laguna twisted the guard's arms out, he cried in pain. The shotgun dropped to the ground. Laguna kicked out, hitting the guard's gut. Choking and sputtering, Laguna took that moment to push him over the edge of the platform and down the incredibly long fall. Breathing hard, feeling dizzy now from the hunger/adrenaline combo, Laguna sighed.
Darn it! I did it again. Well, too bad.
He turned with a grin and pointed to the elevator.
You two just get on and go. I've gotta get my friends.
The guy nodded and he and the Moomba moved to the elevator. They both walked inside and Laguna watched them ride up with a smile. At least the two of them were safe. Now he had to figure out how to save Kiros and Ward completely unarmed. He didn't need to worry about it. Even as he was turning, the two of them ran up from the lunatic Pandora. Ward was carrying his harpoon. Kiros had one of his guitar in his hand, the other still on his belt, and Laguna's machine gun in his other hand.
Kiros. Ward. Great timing.
He beamed.
Here.
Kiros tossed him the gun and Laguna snatched it from the air, grinning.
Let's hurry up and... Hey!
The three of them turned at the guards coming up the stairs. They had their shotguns leveled at their heads and were growling.
Stop talking and get walking. Or should I say... bad timing.
Kiros corrected.
It's not so bad,
Laguna shrugged.
2 is better than 1, and 4 is better than 2, right?
Kiros frowned, struggling to follow that math. He could even see the guards puzzling over that one, trying to figure out what he was talking about. Okay, 1 made sense. When did it become 2? And...
So who's the 4th one?
Kiros asked for them, crossing his arms in worry.
Are you starting to hallucinate? When was the last time you ate? Yeah. I can see it now.
Laguna dropped to his knees, reaching out with a dopey smile for absolutely nothing.
Oh, my sweet Elle. You make your uncle so happy. Laguna.
Kiros leaned over him as the guards came in slowly. The last guy who lost it had ended up biting a guard's ear off. They weren't willing to risk the same fate and were moving in carefully, putting their guard up against crazy, but letting it down against a strategic attack. As one started around him, Laguna dropped his gun and yanked on the trigger backwards. The barrage of bullets, coated in the fairy's ice magic, exploded through his uniform. The kind not destined to absorb magical attacks. Ward and Kiros reacted much quicker than the second guard. Kiros slammed his fist into the guard's chest.
Water!
The spell poured into his helmet as Ward picked him up, then threw him over the edge. The first guard dropped, ice spearing his body, as Laguna got back to his feet.
GAAA Illinois break!
He yelled loud and proud, laughing.
Yes! Thank Hein for fairies!
The three of them turned and ran to the elevator. The guy who had escaped had sent it back down again, just in case Laguna needed it quickly. The three friends hopped on board and rode it up. They were trying not to celebrate prematurely, but it was a hard thing to avoid. However, when they snuck into the control room, they did so silently. Dr. Odin, or what Laguna assumed was Dr. Odin, what the hell was he wearing around his neck? Was standing beside two of his assistants. They were talking to themselves. Laguna only caught pieces of the conversation.
That is. Luna. Weep. Moon. Listen.
What the heck were they talking about? That Dr. Odin was a strange one. Laguna stood by the door with the other two, eavesdropping without shame. The assistant on the left was shaking head.
To use the lunatic Pandora as a weapon, you would need a system to move it. Are you researching that now? But of course. How do you come up with such bold ideas? I could never come up with such brilliant plans. My genius knows no bounds.
Dr. Odin was rather arrogant.
Lunar base was built in space to observe the moon,
the second assistant said, leaning on his hand as he typed on the console with the other.
So much money was spent on building it. Now, why couldn't they give some of that money to this lab? That is the way it is.
Dr. Odin grumbled unhappily.
Accept it.
The first assistant frowned.
I've heard rumors that little girls are being abducted for the sorceress research. I have a daughter myself. It disturbs me to hear such a story. How do you think their parents feel, Dr. Odin?
Laguna's eyes widened. Yes. That was what he wanted to know. Dr. Odin sniffed primly.
They will be proud to help the research, of course. That is all that matters.
Laguna nodded to his friends as the assistants started arguing about a magazine. He had new lead on Elone now. This was turning out better than he could have expected. The three of them sprinted from the lab. As the door slid shut silently behind them, they raced down towards the end of the walkway. Down at the bottom of the stairs, the scruffy guy and the Moomba were standing behind a pillar. The guy broke out into a wide grin as they approached.
You made it!
He cried happily, stepping out with the Moomba.
Hey!
Laguna waved at them.
You waited for me.
The Moomba growled softly.
Thanks, buddy,
Laguna smiled at him. The Moomba nodded before turning and running off.
Stay on your toes.
Laguna yelled after him.
Don't get caught again. Oh, darn it. I promised him a meal and a nap when we got out.
Oh well. Laguna supposed he would be better off running free.
Laguna.
Kiros tugged on his sleeve. Laguna turned quickly and started to see one of Dr. Odine's assistants coming towards them. His hand twitched on his machine gun, but the scruffy guy stopped him.
Hey, it's okay. He's also a resistance member. He's Dr. Odine's first assistant. All the hot info about the lab comes from him. Oh.
Laguna blinked as the assistant stepped in front of them. He nodded to his companion.
Is he a new member? Welcome to our group.
Laguna shrugged. He didn't remember joining, but oh well. Kiros and Ward shared a look behind his back.
You three made quite a bit of noise down there. This is probably a good time for you to leave the facility while Dr. Odine rages at the guards. He's already grumpy today as it is. Did something happen to the doctor?
The scruffy guy asked.
Did Adele stop funding his lab or something? No, nothing like that. It's just... he's done it again. He's found a new toy he prefers over a big one like the lunatic Pandora, but Adele won't let him play with her. Her? Yeah, some girl child named Elone. I hear she's got... Elone.
Laguna cried, stepping forward with Kiros and Ward.
You said Elone. Why? You know her. Know her?
Kiros laughed sardonically.
She's really the only reason why we're here.
Ward nodded quickly.
Where is she?
Laguna grabbed the assistant by the shoulders desperately.
Where's Elone? I don't know. I've been on the Pandora for months. Dr. Odine would know her whereabouts though. He's the one who had her confined. So I just have to get Dr. Odine, right?
Laguna looked back at his friends. They nodded and he turned with determination in his eyes.
We're going back. Thanks for all your help. You better go someplace safe now. Adios.
Laguna started running, Kiros and Ward on his heels.
Wait a second.
The resistance guy called out, stopping him.
I still owe you.
Laguna turned back and the assistant was smiling at him.
If you're looking for that girl, Elone, you'll eventually need help. As far as Esthar is concerned, she's property of Adele. Taking on a sorceress with just the three of you will be difficult. No, impossible. Why not let us help you? We can provide you with all the information you'll need. It's not a bad idea,
Kiros told Laguna softly.
We don't know anything about Esthar. I never want to go through all this again. I'm sure Ward feels the same way.
Laguna looked between his friends. They looked just as haggard as he probably did. He didn't want to put them through this again either. And if the resistance wanted to help... well, Adele was a tyrant anyway.
Okay, fine,
Laguna nodded to the resistance members.
We'll accept your help. In return, we'll help you anti-Azel movement or whatever.
Kiros groaned as Ward face-palmed.
It's Adele,
he translated for the silent Ward.
Start listening more closely cause it's getting embarrassing. That's what Ward is saying. Can't you see it in his eyes? Yeah, sure. I always see it.
Laguna assured him brightly. They all knew he was lying.
But... who cares? I speak with passion, from the heart. That's what matters most. Yeah.
The resistance guy nodded, smiling gently.
That's right. It all sounds crazy, but I like you. I really do. And I want you to be our leader. Seriously.
Laguna beamed at him, giving him a thumbs up.
Just leave it to me. Once we find Elon, I'll take you up on that offer. Now if you'll excuse me, I need pay a little visit to Odin. You guys wait right there.
Oh, darn it. He did it again. Why didn't he ever think things through before he answered? This was literally not something he should ever decide on a whim. Oh, well. Everything had worked out well to this point. He was sure that they would end up just fine. He had really good luck. Kiros and Ward followed him back into the lab. He expected Dr. Odin to be right at the council, but the older man wasn't. Laguna frowned, looking around.
Where did he go? Below.
Kiros suggested. Laguna nodded and ran to the elevator. They had to wait for it to come back up, but it was a short trip, equally long on the way back down. They spotted him the moment the doors opened. He was at the computer terminal that the other guy had been working on. He was grumbling as he typed something out, that weird saucer around his neck wobbling as he did so.
Dr. Odin!
Laguna yelled, running out.
Where's Elon?
The guard standing in the doorway jumped. He looked at them in shock.
Can't believe you guys came back.
Laguna lifted his machine gun. It took only one shot to knock the guard back, pinning him to the wall with an ice spear through his chest. The fairies were still with him.
You fools!
Another ran inside.
Water!
Kiros threw out his hand. The puddle appeared in the floor. The guard stepped into it, slipped, and fell right over the edge. Dr. Odin watched the whole thing with wide eyes. Laguna stalked towards him slowly.
What are you saying?
He said, his eyes darting erratically.
I do not know any. Elon.
Laguna pointed his machine gun.
Okay. I was lying. Elon. I know Elon.
Ducking quickly under Laguna's arm, he ran past the three of them. He was short, but he moved quickly with his stunted, hurried steps. He ran into the elevator.
Hey! Wait! Where's Elon?
Laguna and the boys followed him into the elevator right before it closed.
Answer me!
The elevator jerked as it started up. Odin turned to them, fluttering his long, billowing sleeves out as he worked to the front. He sent Laguna a dark look.
And who are you? Don't change the subject.
Laguna was this close. This man was the only one standing between him and Elon, and he was getting desperate. The elevator came to a halt and Odin nearly dropped out of the door. Laguna, prepared for him to start running away, was already sprinting after him. Odin was fast for an old scientist. He was rushing out the door, forcing Laguna to run after him.
Where did you take her?
Laguna demanded to know as Kiros and Ward came out behind him. Laguna jumped forward, grabbing Odin's saucer neck piece.
Tell me where.
Odin struggled against him for a long moment. Kiros stepped up next to him, looking out to find the resistance members. He spotted both of them behind a bush. He deliberately stepped in Odin's line of sight for that direction so he didn't spot them.
In O lab.
He finally yelled unhappily.
Elon is there.
Laguna released him and Odin scrambled to run back inside the workshop. As he disappeared, his assistant stood up and came over to them.
He means Odin's laboratory. It's in the city proper. It takes a little navigating to get there.
As the assistant explained the directions, the other resistance guy came around with a car. He opened the door and stood up from the inside as the assistant finished.
Get all that?
The assistant asked kindly.
I see.
Laguna nodded, touching his chin.
I didn't understand a word. Kiros. It's your show from here.
Laguna ran off towards the car as Kiros rolled his eyes.
Is he always like that?
The assistant asked.
Regretting your decision to make him a leader candidate?
Kiros asked calmly.
Actually no. I can appreciate a man who can delegate duties based on what he can't do. And, honestly, when I compare him to the current choice. Fair point.
Kiros nodded to him as he and Ward followed him into the car.
I'll join you as soon as I can,
the assistant said as the other guy got behind the wheel.
Until then, good luck. Please be careful.
Laguna nodded to him as they pulled away. He was this close.
This is the place, right?
Laguna asked, looking around the room they had walked into. There was a weird podium/seat thing in the center and a large locked double door at the far end.
Man, this whole city is weird. Hey.
He turned back and was surprised to see only Kiros and Ward.
Hey, where's the other guy? I think he must be looking for us.
Kiros peered over his shoulder. Ward raised his eyebrow, making a face.
Yeah. You wouldn't usually jump out of a moving car. Whoa, it just kinda sped off.
Laguna looked out the glass front doors.
I hope he's alright. I think we might have surprised him. I think we have bigger problems to worry about.
Laguna turned and followed Kiros's line of sight. 2 guards were running down a pink tube on the ceiling. They jumped down out of the hole, charging for them.
Get rid of him.
Laguna aimed his gun. He let off 3 quick shots and took out 1 guard. Ward threw his harpoon. It rocked as it slammed into the man and, instead of slipping off as weapons usually did, it sank down through him. Laguna didn't know what magic the fairies gave him, but apparently it was powerful.
Okay.
Laguna ran forward. He stepped on the weird platform thing and it jumped at his touch. He started, falling back a step. It settled back down and Laguna frowned.
What the? So many unusual gadgets here.
Curious, he took a seat onto it. Once again, it jumped to life, starting to rise. Kiros and Ward almost weren't fast enough to sit next to him before the platform thing began rising. It carried them up into the tube, then down the length of it into the building. It stopped outside another pair of double doors. These weren't locked though. They opened easily when Laguna stepped up to it. The swish caught the attention of the guard at the control panel. He jumped, looking over to them.
Intruders!
Kiros ran forward. Before he could hit an alarm button, Kiros stabbed his guitar into his chest. Slicing out, the guard dropped dead. Laguna was already running to the large window on the far side of the room. He pressed his hands to the glass, gasping as he looked down.
Elone! Elone! Alone.
The tiny little girl in a tattered blue dress crying alone in the room below didn't move. She just continued sobbing into her hands. Laguna slammed his fist onto the glass, but it didn't even thud that loud on this side of the glass.
Darn! She can't hear me.
He stepped back, looking around. His eyes hit the console. He ran over to it, slamming his hands down onto the buttons randomly. He didn't really understand Estharian technology. A large error displayed across the screen. Laguna kept smacking at the board.
Do you know what you're doing?
Kiros asked. Laguna bit his lip and just kept beating at the buttons until, finally, a small message across the screen announced the door had been unlocked. Laguna froze then. For just a second. Then he turned and sprinted back out of the room. Kiros and Ward almost didn't keep up. They sat back onto the platform and rode it back down. The resistance guy had made it back inside by then. He watched them land, standing beside the double doors that led to the confinement room. Laguna ignored him and his friends and ran towards those doors. They opened as he approached and the soft sobs of his sweet Elle washed over him.
Alone.
She jumped as he ran inside.
Uncle Laguna.
Tear tracks stained her cheeks as she stood up. Her pretty eyes were wide with disbelief as he slid to a halt in front of her. His hands were shaking as he took hold of her. Jerking her to him, he held her tiny body tightly, tears of his own building in his eyes.
See?
He said gently, his voice breaking.
I told ye I'd come save you. Sorry I'm a little late. But...
End of chapter.